Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our first edition of our in-person walk-off. We haven't done this in quite a long time. No radio, but we've kind of turned into a little bit of a talk show. I got a little bit of a new style here in the walk.
It's better than the Zoom.
And this is better. So we have our first episode of the walk-off, and let's just kick it off. First of all, this is our newest TV to show off our stats and everything and show what we want to talk about. So I said we just dive right in. All right. First of all, let's talk about the amazing Braves. A couple days ago, they clinched, which, I mean, we all knew was coming.
Shocker of the century, Braves clinch, yeah. It's every year it seems like these past few years the Braves have just been competitive. They've been dominant, and we'll see. If they choke again in the playoffs, we'll see. But I got a lot of faith in them, man. I really think they're gonna go far. Tough to say if to win a World Series, but I think they're gonna go back. I really don't. I mean, looking at National League, who's gonna beat them to get to the World Series?
It's entirely true. I mean, 6th straight season they clinch. They've been incredible all through that time. We can talk about dynasties. This is one of those dynasties. Anthony, you just said, maybe they'll go to the playoffs. Who knows? Or maybe they'll go to the World Series. Who knows? This is the team to beat right now. And people have said, there's no one that can beat them. The Phillies can beat them. The Brewers can beat them. But I think it all comes down to October. What happens there?
Exactly. October, I mean, it truly is. I know it's always been a tournament, but it's really like an old school tournament now where anybody could win. It's kind of like the Sweet 16 I look at in basketball. So many upsets. And now baseball is kind of becoming like that. In the past, it was usually the teams that were great would win. 98 Yankees, 86 Mets, the list goes on and on. But now, some of these great teams that win, like we saw the Braves last year, won well over 100 games and got knocked out. So, it's entirely possible for anybody to win. It's not to say that the Braves, just because they're doing great, that they'll choke again. But it's really anybody's game now in this new baseball year. Baseball years now. It's been, since the expanded playoffs, even more post wild card, it's just been crazy.
Yeah, and we remember last year's playoffs, Dave Roberts of the Dodgers said he really didn't need the break, and he thinks that that's part of the reason that they lost in the division series. And the Braves also lost in the division series. So it's anybody's ball game. I mean, the Phillies came from a 6th seed to the World Series. Like, anything can happen. Speaking from that point, also, the Astros might be in a wild card position, and we've talked about it before. I think, personally, that they are built for the playoffs. They, in the 6th spot, in the 1 spot, wherever you want to put them, they have probably the best chance to make it to the World Series, in my opinion.
I could really see Astros Braves. I think that's a really good possibility. But we'll see. Like we just mentioned, these waiting times that the really good teams have sometimes can be very detrimental. And I think that's something that, as maybe we, even before the new CBA, however many years from now, maybe something that we'll see a change in. Because the time off, it's not like football where these guys really need to rest their bodies. Sure, they need to rest a little bit, but after a certain amount of time, these pitchers need to pitch, these hitters need to hit, and they can easily get in funks. And I think that's really what happened to the Braves last postseason. They didn't look like the same team in that division series. They looked off kilter. They didn't look, none of the players were hot really. And it's coming off of the end of the season where they were hot as fire. So, that's my main problem with it, is that if you're going to have the added teams, fine. But you got to make it that the teams that won all those games don't have to sit there for a week sometimes and do nothing. It's not, baseball isn't a sport where you can sit around for a week. You sit around for a few days, all right. But for a week, your pitchers are getting messed up, your hitters are getting messed up, and it could really lose you a World Series like it might have last year for the Braves.
Exactly. And, one day is nothing. Because one day, that's okay. 2 days, probably maybe the same results, but a week, like 5 days, 6 days, there's only so much that, a pitching machine can do for you. You see a fastball, you see a curveball, but you're not seeing like Zach Wheeler's curveball. You're not seeing Clayton Kershaw's curveball. Like, there's different aspects to the game for everyone. And I don't know. But Acuna's been red hot for this team. This team looks somehow different from last year, although the only real addition that they've gotten is Orlando Arcia, shortstop, and Sean Murphy to the backstop, which, in all honesty, really shouldn't have been that big of a change, but has really been that big of a change. And Acuna's having an MVP-like year. Matt Olson has over 40 home runs and is above Shohei Ohtani for the home run lead. I think this is the year the Braves make it to the World Series. And I know I've been a big guy for the Phillies, saying that they can make it there, but in all honesty, the Phillies are really streaky. They can have a hot streak because that's all it takes. But the Braves have been overall the best team.
I wouldn't be shocked to see another rematch of Philly Brave NLDS if it shakes out that the Phillies win a wild card series. It really wouldn't surprise me. The question is, will it be a different result? Time will tell. I think in addition to only a couple additions, but you're seeing Michael Harris a year older now, another year in the league, Acuna being healthy, the pitching staff really stepping up. And I really think that's been the difference maker. Not that they were bad last year. Obviously they weren't. They were one of the best teams in baseball. But I think that's the difference maker to them being the best team in baseball this season. Their young players are just a little bit more experienced now. They're more in tune with the league. And everybody forgets Acuna last season hardly played, and they won as much with that. So if Acuna can stay healthy, you have him in that division series. You have that's a whole other element there. So I don't know. It'll certainly be interesting. I kind of hope to see another Brave, even though I don't like either team. It will be very interesting because the Phillies, like you mentioned, very streaky. At times they could be, like we saw them, they became the hottest team in baseball, went to a World Series, but they could also go in really bad ruts sometimes. So I think it's a really interesting series. Obviously, division rivals and everything, but I kind of hope to see that. No matter who wins, I'm going to be angry, but it'll be good baseball at least.
Exactly. And we're hoping for the best for whoever can get there. But moving on to our next topic, George Kirby. We were just talking about this in our sports society class. George Kirby regrets going out for the 7th. He had a 4-2 lead going into the 7th. And at the beginning, he had a 2-run lead, and he had 96 pitches. By the end of the 7th, he got taken out. He loses his W. He lets up a game-tying home run to the 9-hitter for the Rays. And, the Rays are a very good team. They've kind of gone a little silent lately, but they still are a pretty good team. Kirby states that he didn't want to pitch in that 7th. He didn't want to come out for it.
I can't remember a pitcher ever saying this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't remember a pitcher ever going to the media and saying, I wanted to be taken out of the game. It's certainly something that would never have happened, 10, if we go even 10 years ago. It's a very new thing that a pitcher would say this and, not get sat for it, not miss a start for it, not face any type of, consequences from the organization. But I don't like it. I have no problem if you went to the manager in the game, said, look, this is all I got. Like, your team's better suited if we go to the bullpen. No problem with that. But even if the manager didn't listen to him and they put him back out there, are you really going to fault your manager for trusting you? Like, if a manager can't trust you, you're not going to be in the league. And George Kirby's a good pitcher. I don't want to take anything away from him. But you don't do that. You're showing up your manager at that point. You're showing up your team at that point because you're saying, I'm not worthy of being out there. Well, what does that say about you? Even if you feel like there's been so many guys that are left in too late. I mean, as a Met fan, I can think of Matt Harvey. He was left in too late, but he wanted to be in that game. And you never heard him make an excuse that Terry Collins left him in. He said, look, it was on me. I went out there. I gave up the runs. I lost the game. It's on me. George Kirby didn't say that. Instead, he's just like, I didn't want to be out there, and he put me out there, and, well, whatever happened, happened. I looked at it as a very cowardly type of thing. I don't... It's not the right thing to say. Certainly not the right thing to say if you want to be viewed as the leader of a team, especially with the Mariners being as young of a team as they are, and still in playoff contention very easily. So it's not like we're in, this is Oakland A or something. This is a very big story. So it really surprises me. I've seen former big leaguers Roger Clemens commented on it. It's been a big Twitter story, but it just shocked me. I don't know. Could you think of anybody that ever said that before? I can't.
I can't either, and I can't think of someone so young saying this. Like, he is a young pitcher. He made it to his first All-Star game this year, and you're throwing your manager under the bus. They ended up losing this game 7-4, which, that's something. But, first of all, they shouldn't have lost this game. If you didn't want to be in the inning, I've seen pitchers who have said, like, that was a bad move by my manager. I don't remember the Giants pitcher. I forget his name. That, like, yelled at Gabe Kapler on the mound.
Yeah, I've seen that. But the difference is that's an on-the-field thing. I mean, it's still showing up the manager, but I would think if you're on the field and the emotion comes out on the field, that's one thing. But I think in the post-game press conference, maybe it's just me. I just kind of look at that as a kind of a separate thing. It's the same type of issue, but I think I look at it separately when you're in the clubhouse as opposed to when you're on the field.
Yeah, and he actually apologized for his comments, but I want to say yesterday. But nonetheless, I mean, you can't be throwing your manager under the bus. For a team that's really trying to make a playoff run, that's not what you should be doing. This is a very good team. The Mariners have had a really big hot streak. I mean, we talk about hot streaks. The Mariners are one of those teams that, kind of had a fire lit under them and really have worked with it. And George Kirby has been a really big part of that. And to say, I shouldn't have been out there for the 7th, that's almost insulting.
It definitely is insulting, for sure.
You're right. It's almost cowardly. You get this chance to pitch out there, and I don't want to say that, he kind of didn't give it his all in the 7th, because I hope he did. But you got to think, if he's coming out to the media and telling them, hey, I didn't want to be out in that 7th, I don't know why you put me out there, then that kind of says that, that entire 7th inning you weren't trying.
Well, it's tough to say. I don't think any player is going out there and not trying, because it doesn't benefit themselves. Even if they're a me player, it doesn't benefit themselves. You're out there eventually to make money, to win. And so I don't know about that. I think he wanted the blame deflected off of him. I think he was out there and he was probably thinking in his head, man, the media's going to be after me. I blew this game. We're in a tight race. And I think he was like, screw it. I'm just going to tell the media that I didn't want to be out there and deflect the blame. Little did he know it was just going to make him look. If anything, if he didn't say that, the manager would have faced more scrutiny. If the focus was shifted off of the manager and onto him. So it backfired. But I'd be really shocked if someone didn't try, because they'd be really stupid, frankly, to do that, because what do you gain? But yeah, I just look at it. He was out of gas. It's not that I don't agree with George Kirby. I agree. The guy should have been out of the game. But it's not. You're not on radio saying this. You're not us. You're not covering the sport. You're a player. So it's not your job to say that. Leave it to people like us to criticize. It's not. You're a player. Go out there, do your job, and that's it. Your job isn't to analyze things.
I agree. I think also, yes, he should have been taking out. 96 pitches probably isn't too much, and he's definitely gone over 96 pitches before. But you're in this tight race, as you said. Sometimes you don't want to really take the chance. But I think Mariners were kind of thinking more of, I don't want to take the chance on my bullpen. George Kirby's been so good today. It kind of stinks that he gives up the quality start, he gives up the win, but sometimes that's baseball, and that's just how it works. The Rays are in a big race right now. The Mariners are too. This is two teams that you really got to give your all when you're facing.
I understand the thought process behind it. I love the old school thing of pitchers going deep in games. I love not having a pitch count to a certain point. I'm all for that, but the fact is, in today's game, pitch counts are there. Pitchers don't go that deep in games anymore, and you're especially dealing with a young player here that is brought up his whole life with pitch counts, brought up his whole life with his arm being monitored, probably hardly ever going beyond the 7th inning, or even in a 7th inning. So you got to keep in mind what you're dealing with. You're not dealing with a veteran. You're dealing with a young guy that's never had to deal with that before. So I get the thought process behind it. You want to stick with your guy, and no matter how good your bullpen is, you never fully trust it. You never really want to bring in, unless you have a lockdown guy. You never really want to bring in a bullpen guy if you have a guy having a really good game. But you got to keep in mind where the game's at, and you got to manage in 2023. You can't manage like it's the 1980s or 90s anymore. It's a different game, and these guys are managed differently. And it's these guys are also, a lot of them are divas nowadays. You would never see a pitcher doing this. I don't care what generation you talk about. A pitcher would never say this. It's never happened. There's been pitchers that show up managers, sure, but most of the time that's because they're getting taken out. Very rarely do you see a guy, look at the dugout because he wants to get taken out. No, it's most of the time the manager's coming out and they're yelling, "No, I want to stay in." So I don't know. It's something that I'm sure we'll see more of as the years go on. But it's just really weird. Somebody's watched, and you have watched your baseball our whole lives, never seen something like this. And it's something that we're, like I said, probably going to see more of, which kind of stinks.
Yeah, I know. It does kind of stink. But, you still have the Verlanders of the games. The guys, he can't really go that long anymore because he's 40. But, you got the Verlanders of the games. You still have the Sandy Alcantara's, even though he's out for the rest of the season. You still have him. There's always one or two guys. And it just seems like maybe George Kirby isn't that guy. He's an all-star pitcher, so you got to give him, credit where credit's due. But that's one of his flaws. And now I think when he hits free agency, when if he's put on the trade block, this might be something that people will go back and look at and say, well, he's not going to give his all in the 7th.
Yeah, Yeah, well, they also don't want to deal with the locker room issue. I mean, I'm sure that his teammates weren't very happy that he was saying that. It adds attention to the team that isn't warranted, that doesn't need to be there. It's bad enough they blew a lead. They're in a pennant race. Every game is super stressful, and you're adding this whole other. Now, I'm sure other players are being asked, "What do you think about Kirby's comments? Did he throw his manager under the bus? Would you have acted in a similar way?" Guys don't want to be asked that, and it creates a whole nother story there where it doesn't need to be. And we've seen that so many times, not only in baseball but in sports, where guys are creating stories and negative press to their team for literally no reason, and especially during times where they really don't need it, where it's really important moments. So I don't get it, and maybe it's just that he's young and he'll learn as he gets older. Could be the case, but it's not a good look for him, and it's certainly whenever he hits free agency, if he does, it's going to be something that teams think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Only time will tell what happens to the Mariners and what happens to George Kirby. But as we move on to our next topic, yes, is Mike Trout swimming away? Mike Trout, or the Angels have said that if Mike Trout wants to leave, they will try to find him a trade. Shohei Ohtani is almost inevitably gone now. He's been out for the past 7 days with an oblique issue, which you really hate to see. It's bad for the game of baseball. It's bad for, it's bad for the Angels. And now potentially they're saying goodbye to a guy that they signed to a 12-year contract in 2019.
Well, maybe the Angels have been listening to our show, and that they finally learned. But too little, too late at this point. If you wanted to get rid of these guys, the trade deadline was the time. That's when teams are most desperate. You're not going to find it. Well, maybe you could, but you're not going to find a team that desperate in the winter meetings. You could steal some players and get a good deal, but mid-season is teams want to win. The result still isn't there. Winter meetings, you still got a whole season to go, full 162 games. So you could still get a good amount from Mike Trout. I'm not saying you can't, but he is older. He's had his injury problems. His production is still good, but isn't what it once was, 5-6 years ago. So I don't know. You'll still get a good haul for him. But imagine if you package Trout and Ohtani. I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record because we mentioned it so many times, but if you package Trout and Ohtani at the trade deadline, when Ohtani was healthy before he had the UCL and oblique, you would have gotten like 10 players at least. So I don't know. If I'm an Angels fan, I'm happy they're at least doing this because he deserves to win, and the Angels are in rebuild mode, obviously. But I think it's a little bit of too little, too late.
Yeah, and you mentioned the injuries. I mean, Trout has a back issue that, has been said that he can't really fix. It's just going to happen at some times, and he can't really deal with that. And that's awful because he's, at his prime. And when he's on the field, just like, Judge, he's one of the best players in the league. And he's exciting to watch. I mean, his highlights are up there right now. But 13 years in LA, 3 MVPs, 1 Rookie of the Year. He's batted over 300. He's, signed since 2019 to 2030. He's only played in 3 playoff games. So this might be a good move for him. The only thing I'm saying is, and it's the same thing with the Yankees and Stanton. Like, I've heard people say, like, we got to trade Stanton. But who's going to want to take on that contract? Who's going to want to take on that contract for, how good they're playing? Or for Mike Trout's case, how much is he playing?
Yeah, I look at Trout and Stanton as 2 separate issues. Giancarlo Stanton, both have had injuries, but Giancarlo Stanton's been largely unproductive. He's been liability at the plate, liability in the field. Mike Trout has also had a ton of injury issues also, but when he's healthy, he still produces. He's not what he was a few years ago, but he still puts up really solid numbers. He's still an all-star when he's healthy in the first half, and he could still be a valuable asset to a team. Now, can he stay healthy majority of the season and the playoff season? We've never seen, because the guy's hardly ever been in the playoffs, and when he was in, he was out very early. So he never played deep into October. That's an unknown. But it's tough to say. I mean, I think the Angels are going to have to take a large chunk of it. They're not going to find a team that's going to willingly take like 70% of it or even 60% of it. They're going to have to take about half, I would say, at least. So as for what team, it's tough to say. I mean, maybe the Giants. I don't think they would go to the Dodgers. I don't think they would want to give him to another California team, but they would be a candidate. I'm sure they'll give an offer. It would definitely be one of those big market teams. I don't think the Mets are. I don't think the Yankees are. But I think there will be suitors for him. It's certainly not going to be a deal that it would have been a few years ago. But he'll still get a pretty good return for him. I just think that the contract's really going to take a long time to sort out, and I don't know if they're necessarily going to get it done for that reason. But if they do, they'll still get a solid return.
Yeah. One team that I've heard that Bleacher Report put out, so not anyone that I know, but the Phillies. He's a big Eagles fan. He said that he's always wanted to play with Philly. He's a big Phillies fan. He was a kid. But personally, I don't want him. I love Mike Trout. I think he would be great for the team if he came in like after this big contract. That if he comes over, that would be the third big contract the Phillies got to take on. And even if the Angels do pay half of it, then you still have to have Mike Trout for this long. And he is an amazing player. But the Phillies are developing players, and just like the Giants, but the Phillies mostly are developing players in the outfield. Brandon Marsh. They could use another outfielder, but then you got to kick someone off the team. I don't know. Personally, I've heard the Phillies a little bit, and I not that I don't want him, but I don't want to take away, something bigger for him.
That's interesting. So, but you said that I don't think after this contract he's ever going to play. I don't think past 2030. I'd be shocked if he honestly made it to 2030 with the way he's going. Because you got to keep in mind, he's 30 years old now? He's in his early 30s.
Yeah.
So, 20, 37 years from now, he's going to be in his late 30s. Unless all of a sudden he gets healthy, I think he's going to probably be out of baseball either after that year or before that year. I can't see any universe in which he's about 37, 38 years old and continuing to play.
I don't know. I feel like he's going to kind of follow Pujols and just kind of, play for as long as he can. And, yeah, I can't see a world where he retires at 38. I could see a world where he decreases insanely in value by 35. I don't actually know how old he is at the moment, but that I think he's too invested in the game of baseball, and I think maybe not he won't be on the field as much, but the advice that he can give the new players would be critical.
That surprises me because Pujols did have his injury troubles, but he never had anything as serious as Trout's back. Like Trout's back, if any moment that gives out, he's done with baseball. Like he has to retire. So I think that's kind of the difference maker. Pujols had some lingering injuries, and he was out for periods of time and stuff like that. But Pujols also played till he was 42 years old. So maybe I'll be playing this clip back years from now, and I'll be eating my words, but I don't see him. I hardly even see him lasting until 37. To be honest with you, I think he's probably by the time he's about 35, 36, he's gonna really taper off and just kind of be an average player at best. I think he's gonna, and that's in part due to injuries. If he was a healthy player, that guy could certainly play into his 40s, but he just doesn't have the health on his side. So, yeah, I think it's kind of, if you're gonna get Trout, it's kind of now or never. I don't think that this is kind of the last opportunity for him to get dealt. After this year, I think into 24, 25, he's going to regress, and you're not going to find as many teams that are willing to give up anything or even take even a little bit of that contract.
That's interesting to me. I feel like there's going to always be one team that's out for Mike Trout, and I think it might be like a Steve Carlson kind of thing that he hangs on for too long, but I do think he's going to hang on, and that's what I think. One question. We're looking at, he's played 13 years now. He's been here since 2010. He's got 3 MVPs under his belt. He's been a great player. He's hitting over 300 in his career. He's got a Rookie of the Year. Is he a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Yes. Yeah. I never disqualify a player because of the team they're on. That's not fair to me. Baseball, more than any other sport, is a team sport. And there's plenty of guys in the Hall of Fame that, won nothing with their teams because their teams were terrible. He's done, what else do you want the guy to do? He's over 300. He's had, batting championships. He's had MVPs, Rookie of the Years, Silver Sluggers. He's done it all for, is also for a long period of time. Like, it's not, he's had his injury issues, but for a solid, 7-8 years in a row, he was pretty consistent. He had MVPs. He had Rookie of the Year. And to me, that's good enough. And even with his injury problems, he still had good, solid seasons. He still had all-star seasons. So yeah, I would say he's first ballot. Put it to you this way: if you have other guys that are for first ballot Hall of Famers or even Hall of Famers in general, and you don't put Trout in until he's well older and into the whatever they call the ballots where after 30 years after they retire and they vote them in, if they have that, I'll be very disappointed in the Baseball Hall of Fame because there's zero reason for it. He's played the game right. He's stuck by an organization that he really didn't need to stuck by because he loves the fans. He's done everything he could, and it's not his fault that they haven't made it to the playoffs very often. So I would say, without a doubt, should be first ballot Hall of Famer. Will he be? I can never predict with the Baseball Hall of Fame because they're very unpredictable, but I think he should be 100%.
Yeah, and I think there's like maybe 3 or 4 players with 3 MVPs in their career and a Rookie of the Year. And all of them have played, I think, combined about over 120 postseason games. He's played 3, which really, it sucks. But, I can't see a world where Mike Trout isn't an MVP or isn't a Hall of Famer. Or they're about it, just like you said, like a 6-year period. He always was in the conversation for MVP. He was always number 1 for top 100 MLB players on MLB Network. He is, the guy. He's always been the guy. And just like you said, we were just talking about George Kirby. Mike Trout has never, ever been the guy to, play down on the Angels. He said, I want this team to get better, but that's more motivating than being like this. Exactly. He's been a leader to the squad. Only time will tell what's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen this offseason if anything does happen. Although, I know people are saying that he will get traded. I don't think anyone wants to take on what he's got left.
Yeah, I'll say this. If he gets traded to a team and he makes the playoffs and does well, it certainly only helps him. I don't know. If he were traded to a team and went to the playoffs and didn't do well, I still would say he's a Hall of Famer. I maybe not first ballot at that point. If he went into the playoffs and kind of was a dud and didn't do very much, okay, not first ballot, but still should be a Hall of Famer. Because if you have Scott Rowland in the Hall of Fame, I keep going back to Scott Rowland. No disrespect to the guy, but if Scott Rowland's in the Hall of Fame, Mike Trout should be in the Hall of Fame, no matter kind of what he does for the rest of it. Unless he plays till 45 and is just hitting 100 every year. Then all right, maybe I could kind of consider it, but I don't see that happening. The guy is what he is. Until about Ohtani came into the league, or maybe Judge's rookie year, he was from 2010 to 2016, 17, he was the best player in baseball every single year. And since then, he's been still a very, very good player and still in that conversation. Certainly top 5 player in baseball since then. And so, what else do you want the guy to do? The team hasn't been good enough. Simple as that.
Yeah, and we'll keep an eye on this, but only time will tell. His glove is almost as good as his bat. So we'll have to see. On to our next topic. Jason Dominguez. We're talking about some great stars. Jason Dominguez has only played 8 games, but 4 home runs. Slash line, not the best. 258, 303, 677. But he's been almost a light for this depleting Yankee squad.
He's definitely been a light. The average and all that stuff, because he is what he is. He's a slugger. I think that average when he eventually plays the full season will be much higher. I think he's going to be that 270 hitter. But he has the potential to be the next Aaron Judge. That's a lot to put on a kid like that because Aaron Judge is obviously a superstar and 60 home runs and all that. But it's a blow. And it's definitely a blow for the Yankees. He was the guy, he gave a reason for these fans to watch. The Yankees are still in the dumps and aren't going nowhere. And, they still have some young guys that are playing and everything, Austin Wells and Volpe and all that. But Dominguez was the number 1 prospect in that system. And he was showing it. This guy's 20 years old. And he's coming out there and he's looking, first swing of his career against Justin Verlander, hits a mammoth shot for a home run. That's pretty impressive. He never looked like the lights were too big for him. He's in New York City playing like that. It stinks with the Yankees. He's going to be out a while now. It's going to be, I know it says 10 to 12 months out up there. A position player maybe could come back a little sooner than that. You could potentially see him by summer of next year if things go right. It's all about how he recovers from it. But it's certainly something you never want to see for a guy, especially a guy as young as him. Getting acclimated to the league and everything. He was shaping up to be, and is going to still be probably one of the baseball's brightest young stars.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who don't know, Jason Dominguez goes down with a torn UCL ligament, and he'll be gone for 10 to 10 to 12 months. But just as you said, Anthony, I mean, position players can come back a little early. I mean, we saw Harper. He had Tommy John surgery. Comes back, like, I think 3 months early. But this is a huge blow to the Yankees. I mean, he's really been a great player for this team. He's, as I said before, you know, he's been a light in a dark area. Austin Wells, you know, was called up with him. He's also been pretty good, but Jason Dominguez cannot look past. He's been incredible. And now I think the Yankees really have to decide what they're going to do, because this might be the first season since mid-90s, late 90s, early 90s, that they will be under 500. They're 2 games under 500 right now. We'll talk a little bit later about what happened yesterday to them, or Sunday, what happened to them. But this offseason, if it's going to be big for any team, it'll be big for the Angels and for the Yankees. I think they should try to trade away Stanton now, because if Dominguez comes back, he's going to need some time. I mean, Harper is barely playing first base, and he doesn't even go into the outfield anymore. Dominguez is probably going to be in that DH spot.
He should be. I mean, I know he only played a few games and all that, but really, who else is going to be, you know, that guy? Stanton's done. I don't care what anybody says. The guy's done. I'd be shocked if you found a suitor for him. If you do, you're going to have to pay pretty much all the contract. I don't see anybody paying anything more than league minimum or a little over league minimum for him. You'd be stupid to. You're going to get, you know, a guy that's hitting 200, occasionally gets a homer for you, can't play in the field, and can hardly run. Well, you know, what does that do for you? So, yeah, I'd be if they do give him up, Cashman's gonna have to swallow his pride and just pay a lot of it. And I don't see Cashman doing that, because Cashman's hardly ever done that. Cashman's occasionally willing to give big contracts, as we've seen, but he's very, you know, hesitant to give away guys and still pay them to play for another team, no matter how bad they are. So I really see Stanton being a part of this team next year, or, you know, maybe he'll retire, maybe I don't know, but. Well, actually, no. He's not going to retire, because then he's going to lose money. So he's not going to do that. But I don't see him going anywhere. Maybe they'll send him out to the minors. Maybe they'll be a bench guy. But it's like it's dead weight. There's nowhere for him to go. But another aspect of this offseason I think is interesting. Brian Cashman, does he stay or does he go? Aaron Boone, does he stay or does he go? I think the most likely outcome is that Boone goes, Cashman stays. I think the most likely outcome for this offseason is Boone goes, Cashman stays. I think, you know, you look through the Yankees' history for the past 20-plus years, and Cashman's been a mainstay. He's been in this organization since the 80s as an intern. He's worked his way up. The Steinbrenners love him. He's made it through tough times with the Yankees. You know, this year being definitely one of them, one of those disappointing seasons they've had in a very long time. But the manager's always been the fall guy with them. You know, you go through the list, every single manager under Cashman, he's had to fire. And I don't see that changing. I don't see Hal Steinbrenner, like I've said a billion times, is nothing like his father. He's much more of a businessman, and I think he likes Brian. He's known him his whole life, and I don't see him firing him unless Cashman does something really egregious, or unless the Yankees have a season where they're like 10, 15 games under 500 or something like that. I don't see that happening. I really don't. I think Cashman's in it for the long haul. I think really honestly until Cashman retires or just resigns and wants to go elsewhere himself, I don't see them firing him. I see him staying. I see the Yankees firing Boone and telling, the Yankee fans, look, we did something. We addressed this season. Boone's the reason why we lost, and we're going to rebuild from there, and we'll get a new coach, and everything will be okay. I think they're going to try to sell that. I think Yankee fans are going to be very upset because the sentiment towards Brian Cashman is very bad right now.
I agree. And, Yankees have had their ups and downs, but since 2009, they haven't made a World Series. They haven't won a World Series. And, there's been a couple ALCS, they've made it to the ALCS a couple times, but they've really never had, a big chance to make it to the World Series. I think George Steinbrenner's biggest mistake that he says, his biggest mistake was not keeping Reggie Jackson for too long. He said he should have re-signed him after his contract let up. I think Brian Cashman's biggest mistake is getting Stanton. I said it in our last show, and I'll say it again now. They got Giancarlo Stanton, who was an insanely good player at the time. I mean, the Marlins were having a bit of a fire sale there. They pick him up, but the next year, two big free agents, Manny Machado and Bryce Harper. They thought that they could get Harper and he could play first base for them. He goes to Philly. He plays right field. Where is Harper playing now? He's playing first base for the Phillies. So that's an idea failed. Their third base is, I have no idea. Manny Machado is playing in San Diego. He came in second last year in MVP votes. That could have been huge. And I heard, I've talked to a couple of Yankees fans because, when you live on campus, you get to know every single Mets fan and every single Yankees fan here. And I was talking to my friend, Anthony Cafone, who is a huge baseball fan, and he said that, Stanton, if they got him and if they won a World Series or if they even made like a big trip to the World Series, it would have been a successful deal. But they haven't done that. He's sitting under the Mendoza line right now, which is embarrassing for a guy who hit, 57 home runs, 59 home runs back in 2017. I'm not saying that he needs to keep up that, insane streak, but he's just been awful for these Yankees, and it's really hurt their entire, the Yankee name.
Yeah, he essentially his whole tenure here has been absolutely terrible. He's done nothing for this team. His whole career essentially was really with the Marlins. He's had a little success with the Yankees going back to the beginning, as you mentioned, of his tenure in New York. But outside of that, he's just been a liability. He's been a strikeout after strikeout. He's led the league in strikeouts, I believe, a few times. He's been constantly hurt, and that mammoth of a contract. So. And I agree. If you even get one World Series out of that, it's a success. I mean, the Yankees have been known as a franchise prior to the past few seasons that were willing to spend a ton of money, and as long as they won a World Series out of it, they were fine with it. Even if they didn't get all that money back, the Yankees' name was winning. They were a winning franchise, and that was it. And yet lately, now even more than lately, over the past 15 years, or since 2009. Seeing the Yankees kind of be more of a business. It's more of a business entity than a winning baseball team. I would say it's more of how do we get people to Yankee Stadium? How do we, constantly get these sellout crowds, which they've managed to uphold because Yankee Stadium's, it's a marquee event. Everybody that visits New York wants to go there, and I think they survive off of that. And I think Hal is just much more concerned with getting those people to come to the Yankee Stadium, fielding a team that's, could go to the playoffs, can be entertaining. But, I struggle to say that he doesn't care about winning a championship. I'm sure he does. But it's not his number one priority, I don't think. His number one priority is to make Yankee Stadium a good event to go to field a team that would be competitive and, fun to watch. But that's it. I don't think he's willing to put in that extra effort to win. George, say what you want about him, was willing to do that. He was to a point, harmed himself to a point, obviously, where he thought he was helping the team and wasn't. But he cared, and his number one thing was winning. He liked making money, obviously, but his number one thing was winning. And Hal's, he's a businessman by trade. He's not a baseball guy, other than his father being George. He's not involved in baseball otherwise. He's a Yankees owner, and that's it. So I think he's just more of a guy that wants to make money, which is fine, but don't own a baseball team then. There's plenty of things you can own to make money that people aren't, invested in with their emotions so much and love the team as the Yankees, are. And I don't know. I'm not going to say that the Yankees will never win under Hal, but I think it's going to be a while. I think they should go not totally rebuild mode, but they got to get some young guys in here, more young guys. We've seen what Volpe's done, what Dominguez done in a short amount of time. You need some young guys, some guys that aren't dead weight like Stanton, coming in here and helping out Aaron Judge, helping out Garrett Cole, and helping this team become what they were, in the late '90s, 2000s, which was the best team in baseball consistently.
Yeah, you look at the 90s, you look at 2000 to 2001-ish, and the Yankees were the best team. The Yankees were always, they were a threat, and they've, not to say that they haven't been a threat since, 2001 to 2022, but they just haven't been a big threat in the playoffs, and that's the name of the game. You can win 116 games, which the Mariners did back in 2001, but they lose to the Yankees in the playoffs. So it's just one of those things. It's one of those things, and Jason Dominguez is, a casualty of the Yankees, sadly. You can only hope that he comes back because, just like you said, he's only played 8 games. He's had a pretty big impact to the team in these 8 games, but he's only played 8 games. And now you're going to be gone for a year. If you play 8 games, you have a red-hot start, but you only played 8 games. And we'll have to see what that means, and especially with such an injury-prone Yankees lineup. I mean, Judge is up and down, and when he's up, he's up. He's doing great. But that's not really, helpful in the coming future. We'll have to see. Another thing is, Rizzo's gone for the rest of the year. Rizzo, who had a concussion months ago when Fernando Tatis ran into his head by accident on a pick-off. And the Yankees kind of just, brushed it off the shoulders, say, walk it off. And he's had a concussion. He's been playing awful. And, Anthony, you were talking about it. He was on planes. Planes are not good for concussions.
Yeah, it's it's something that honestly wasn't covered enough. Like, if you think about it, if this was any other team, especially like a Mets or even Phillies, it would be covered ad nauseum. It would be, look at what this training staff did, incompetence, how did they do this, medical incompetence, all that. It was like the day it happened, people were like, wow, it's really weird, but then it was just kind of it. And this is a guy that Anthony Rizzo, up until this year, has been a very good player for the Yankees, underrated. Like he was there every day pretty much. He put up good numbers, he was reliable, and that says a lot for this lineup that, like you said, has a lot of injury-prone guys. So, I don't know what happened in that diagnosis. I don't know how you don't notice a concussion, especially for that long. I'm sure you noticed the guy had headaches, was constantly rubbing his head, probably looked out of it. I know he certainly did at the plate just from somebody watching on TV every once in a while. You saw him and he just looked off. I remember thinking, like, maybe something's going on with him. Maybe something's going on in his life. I don't know. Maybe he's sick. I didn't know what was going on. But I knew something was up. And to think that the Yankees team, who's around him every single day, didn't notice this, it baffles me. I really don't understand it. And hopefully it didn't cause any permanent type damage, because it certainly can. For that long to have a concussion, be flying and all that, and to be playing baseball. Any moment you could take a blow to the head. So I don't know. I look at Rizzo's older now, though. You can't say he's going to come back and be what he was. Who knows what would have happened if they diagnosed this properly, he got his rest, and he came back and everything was fine. We'll never know if he comes back poorly. That's always going to be a question. But Rizzo deserves a lot of credit, and he doesn't get it. He was great with the Cubs. Obviously broke the curse and all that in 2016, but he's still been good in his older years. He's not what he was when he was younger, but he's still a consistent player. And he never really got the credit for that. Everybody was down on him when he was bad, and everybody constantly mentioned him. But when he was good, he was good. He helped in the playoffs. He was, like I said, a consistent part of that lineup. And it really stinks to see him be misdiagnosed like that, because he doesn't deserve that.
No, he doesn't. And I've always loved Anthony Rizzo. I don't think he's the biggest part of why Aaron Judge is still a Yankee, but he's definitely one of the parts why Aaron Judge is still a Yankee. And hopes up for him. It's awful to see, because he always had great personality. You love good personalities in baseball. You love good personalities in New York. It's always big. So we have our newest segment now, which is the starting 5. So here on the Walkoff, we don't always go over the biggest in-game news, but we go over, the big stories. So we want to have a segment for what happened this week. Obviously, there's only 5. The starting 5, starting 5 rotation. But yeah, let's go over this. All right. First of all, Bryson Stott stole number 3,000. That is a new record, or number 3,000 has already broken a record. 3,000 stolen base in Major League Baseball. That's huge.
Yeah, it's the first time, I think, I looked it up earlier. 2012 was the last time there was over 3,000 total stolen bases in Major League Baseball, which is just 11 years now. And even then, I think it was 12 and 11 was back-to-back years where it was over 3,000. prior to that, it wasn't until I think it was like '01. It was early 2000s. So really, I mean, aside from a couple years in the early 2010s, it was a little bit of an anomaly. It's been almost like 20 years to see this consistently happen. Obviously, we all know that the reason for this is the rule changes, the pickoffs, the clock, all that, the widening the bases. It's had an effect for sure, and it's had the desired effect from baseball because ratings have gone up, as we've mentioned, and stolen bases have gone up, and it adds a level of excitement to the game. I wish this could have happened naturally. It's always good to see baseball naturally evolve to things, something that the sport hasn't done in a while, which is part of the reason why all these changes came. But the bottom line is it's having its effect. Games are quicker, games are more exciting. There's more stolen bases. There's more dynamic plays happening, that wouldn't have happened before necessarily, plate to plates, all that type of stuff that, gotta realize guys that are on first base go to second, means you're easily at third more, you're easily at plate to plate more, exciting plays. It leads to more runs, leads to just more excitement in the game, and that's exactly what baseball wants. So I look at all these rules really as a win. I don't have any problem with any of them outside of the second base runner rule and extra innings. But outside of that, I think this has all worked pretty well. I mean, it's been a learning process for some guys. Some guys it's taken a little bit to learn, the new rules and everything. But everybody's kind of adjusted, and it's been kind of a non-story. I'll be interested to see how it works in the playoffs, especially with the pitch clock. But I think, look, you got to adjust. You want to do your job, you want to play well. These are the rules, simple as that. So you got to start stealing bases. Even if you're not a speedster, stolen bases are back in the game. And if you want to get in scoring position, you got to steal a base. Simple as that. And I like that aspect of the game.
Yeah. It's been great, and we've talked about the rule changes a lot, so I don't think there's anything more that I can say about it. But it's been a very fun year to watch that. At number 4, I put Pablo Lopez for the Twins. Had an historic 14 strikeout gem where he only gave up 1 run over a little over 6 innings. The reason I put him at 4 and not a little higher is because he said he was disappointed in himself because he gave up the 1 run. Said that he wasn't really, happy with that, but that shows, he wants to do better. And when you have insane 14 strikeout gem, and you want to do better than that. I mean, if I'm a manager there, I'm happy for this guy. I want him to, be happy for his moment, but I'm happy that he wants it.
Yeah, talk about the right thing to say. That's George Kirby should take a clinic from Pablo Lopez on how to talk to media, how to handle himself. But yeah, Pablo Lopez has always been like an underrated guy. I mean, he's not an ace, I would say, on a World Series winning a team, but he's certainly in that rotation. He's consistent. I think Pablo Lopez is kind of middle name, I would say. He's always out. He's usually healthy. Goes out there, gives you usually a solid 6 innings, 5 innings, 6 innings of maybe 1-2 run ball, and he leaves you in the game. So I mean, was it worth giving up Luis Arias? No, but he's still a solid pitcher, and the Twins obviously they're in first place and everything, but they're not. It's kind of a fake first place because that division is so terrible, but still first place. But he's helped them. He's been rough start to the year. I remember we talked about I think it was May or something. He got off, but he's kind of bounced back. He's been solid, and good for him. Pablo Lopez was always the guy when he was a Marlin that when the Mets faced him, I was like, it's Pablo. Like he's a very underrated guy, and I think should be talked about more often because he's a workhorse. He goes out there, pitches well, he's consistent, and that's hard to find in today's game.
It is. And then number 3, we talked about this on our last show. Giancarlo Stanton crushes number 400. I don't know if this makes him a Hall of Famer yet. Nelson Cruz has also crushed 400, so I've seen the list of players that have hit 400. It's a very star-studded list. But I think if they're just looking at the numbers, this might be a big number for Stanton that puts him in the Hall.
I don't know. I don't know if Stanton. I mean, he's gotten really good numbers. Don't get me wrong. But his tapering off with the Yankees really disrupted me the wrong way. Like, if he would have even been mediocre with the Yankees, I'd say all right. But it's just been so bad. And he's not even that old. Like, it's not like he's 39. He's still in his early 30s, and he could still be productive, theoretically. But it's just not happening. So, I mean, I guess you can maybe put him in, but I don't look at him. I mean, personally, I just don't look at him as a Hall of Famer. Will I be mad if he gets in? No. I'll be mad if he's a first ballot guy, because he's certainly not a first ballot guy. But if he gets in on one of those legacy ballots, 20 years from now or something, whatever. But I just don't look at him necessarily as a Hall of Fame material.
Neither do I. He's played with some Hall of Famers, but I don't think he is one. We'll have to see. A couple days later, Willie Adames met the captain. He met Derek Jeter, which is a big moment for him. I'll roll the clip right now. But he walks away and he's like cheering with his teammates. Like, he was so happy. He looked like a little kid. He didn't really play good in the game. He had an RBI triple, which was really cool, but he had some key errors in the they won the game, but nonetheless, some key errors. But you love to see players, always get giddy around, some legends, and to have the captain, Derek Jeter, give it to him.
Yeah, having Old Timers Day, obviously Yankees has been a tradition for them. And, so I always thought it was cool, every team having the old players come, interact with the current players. Because these guys grew up watching these guys, a lot of them. Willie Adames, I'm sure, grew up watching Derek Jeter, in the 90s, 2000s, and everything. And, how could you not, if you grew up there in that time, how could you not look at Derek Jeter, especially if you want to be a player, like Willie Adames, I'm sure he was when he was a kid. How could you not look at him and idolize him and be like, wow, I wish I'm somewhere near his level one day. So I'm sure it was obviously a really cool moment, but there was a lot of interesting players at that Old Timers Day. I think I saw Darryl Strawberry was there, which is always really weird for me to see him in the Yankee uniform. Joe Torre came back. I watched a little bit of it. It was cool. It's always nice to see guys come back and get cheered on by New York again. New York fans don't forget. That's one thing. If you're good with your team, they'll cheer you when you're 90 years old, the same way they cheered you when you were 20 years old. And I think that's a really cool aspect of New York sports.
I love that about, you can see that kind of really, I see it always on the East Coast because we live here. Like, Philly does the exact same thing. And then our last one, which kind of, hurts the Yankees a little bit. But Brewers get no-hit, or Brewers no-hit the Yankees in Yankee Stadium for 10 innings. 10 innings. And they lose in 13. They gave up a double to Oswaldo Cabrera, which was the first hit in 11 innings. 11 innings. The only thing I have to say about this, first of all, Corbin Burns was great. He pitched 8 innings. He had about 8 strikeouts, I think. It was really good. And then you bring in Devin Williams. But first of all, neither of these teams could bring in a run. We were just talking about the ghost runner on second. They can't bring that runner in. That's a little embarrassing. But also, what was I going to say? Oh, yes. This really talks about how bad the Yankees are right now. There's only one team behind them in batting average, and that's the Oakland A's. Whenever you're in front of the Oakland A's by 1, it's embarrassing.
Yeah, it definitely is. I don't know what to make of this Yankees lineup now. There's not much production, like you said, at all. It's almost unheard of for a pitcher to go over 9 innings and a no-hitter and end up losing the game, but it happened. And for the Brewers angle, it goes back to, remember when they were saying Corbin Burns is the problem, or Corbin Burns, this really showed that Corbin Burns was the problem. The guy went over 9 innings and a no-hitter, and your lineup couldn't get anything for him. So if I'm Corbin Burns, it just makes me want out of there more, to be honest. But anyway, it's a crazy story. I don't think I've ever even heard of anything like that. A no-hitter going into that deep and then losing the game. It's just, wow. That's some loss for the Brewers there. That's an all-timer for sure.
It really is. And we are sadly coming to the end of our show, though. We will be right back here next week to have our next episode here. We will actually, I believe, have a special guest, which we will reveal soon. But anyways, thank you for joining us. Anthony, any final thoughts before we send this guy off?
Listen, we're getting a good part of sports season now. We got some NFL going on. We got some MLB going on. Some of my favorite parts of the sports year, September, October is just peak sports to me. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I like October baseball. We're getting there. And, watching the Eagles is always fun. Anthony watching the Jets is always fun.
Oh, boy, Rodgers tonight. Go Aaron Rodgers. Hopefully future me isn't watching this and crying. Hopefully.
But thank you guys for coming, and we will see you next week on The Walkoff. Thank you.